college in 1754, and we were located by Trinity Church down in the financial district, all the way at the bottom tip of the island. But that didn't really last long because in 1775, a little thing called the American Revolutionary War started up, and we had to close our doors, and we didn't reopen until 8 years after the war ended. When we reopened, the name King's College didn't really fit anymore, so we changed our name to Columbia College, and we moved to Midtown Manhattan, around where Rockefeller Center is located today. But once again, this location didn't last long, and about 8 years after moving there, the university president at the time, Seth Lowe, moved us up to our Morningside Heights campus where we are today, and we've been here since 1897. Back then, it wasn't the big New York bustling city that you may imagine today. It was really just marshland and swamp, and so the university president had a vision that it would become an academic metropolis and a place where students and faculty can really live and learn together. And I'd definitely say his vision was realized, because today we have a 32-acre campus featuring 6,000 undergraduate students, a bunch of the faculty and staff living and working on campus all throughout the year, and it's just a great place to live. I think 6,000 is a really nice number because it's kind of like a medium-sized option. So you're not going to meet everyone, all 6,000 of your classmates, within your time at Columbia, but it's still small enough that there are familiar faces whenever you walk around campus, and you definitely could have, friends in every class that you take if you wanted and things like that. So it's a nice medium-sized option. Moving ahead, this slide shows a bit of Columbia by the numbers. So I'm just going to go around and talk about each of these kind of sections and what it means as a student. So the first is kind of obvious. Academics. We have over 100 programs of study, and this is spread out across majors, concentrations, which are our version of minors, and special concentrations, which can be linguistics and public health. We have 2 undergraduate schools, which I'll talk about a bit later, but between those 2 schools, you're going to find a wide variety of options to study. So like I said, I'm a neuroscience major, which is a major that's split between the biology and psychology department, but I've still been able to kind of dip my toes across the departments and take things that are completely unrelated to my major. They've still been very academically enriching. And you are allowed to double major or have a major and a concentration and things like that. Moving on over to the top right of the slide, we can see some percentages about our student body. And I always like to highlight the 20% international students because this is a pretty high number, especially for like a private university in the U.S. And I think sometimes you don't even realize how international our school is, especially when you're all living together. But since the pandemic has started, it has really kind of pushed us, my friends and I, to face the reality that we all live in such different places. So we're coordinating phone calls across not only just the U.S. time zones, but Singapore time zones and New Zealand time zones as well. So that's a really fun thing to experience. Meeting people from new countries, you are naturally just going to learn about different places and cultures that are not like your own. In addition to that, we have 18% first generation, and over 50% of our students identify as students of color. And so when I was looking for college, diversity was a really important factor to me. I wanted to not only leave home, but go to a place where I was meeting a wide variety of people, and I've definitely been able to do that here. Down in the bottom left, we can see that there are over 150 plus study abroad programs, and our Office of Undergraduate Global Engagement, sorry, it's kind of a long name, does a great job of connecting students to these programs, whether they're deciding to study abroad for a year, a semester, or just a summer. They have programs for all types of things, all types of areas of study, or wherever you'd like to go, even Antarctica. One way that students really like to take advantage of our study abroad is through the language requirement. So we do have a language requirement, which I'll touch on a bit more later, but it's honestly, when you're studying abroad, the first thing you might think of, or at least the first thing I think of, is what language am I interested in learning, what culture am I interested in learning more about. And so I came into Columbia knowing no second language, and so I decided to pick up Portuguese, and I took Portuguese for 3 years, and then I was able to actually go and study abroad in Brazil, and there was literally no replacement for actually being in a country and practicing the language every single day with the local people and making mistakes, but also learning so much more than you can do in a classroom, it feels like. Moving on, we have a 6-to-1 student-to-faculty ratio, and this actually drops down in the sciences to a 3-to-1 student-faculty ratio. But what I also like to point out is that over 80% of our classes have 20 students or less. So you're really going to be taking advantage of seminar-style classes where you are getting to know your professor, getting to know your peers over the course of that semester in a very personalized way. So for example, this semester I have 2 seminars in psychology that are both 15 students only. We just started classes this week, and I'm already very excited to dive into these topics a bit deeper and with a bit more depth. And the professors are so passionate about what they teach and are able to personalize it to what the students are interested in hearing more about. Because since there aren't that many students, you can kind of get to know everyone and get to know their interests. And then lastly, we have $1 billion being invested in research across campus, across the labs on campus. And so I always like to point out that research isn't just STEM focused. You can do research in any field, from physics to poetry to philosophy. You really don't need to be a STEM person to do research, and you don't need to have any prior experience. So if you've never stepped foot in a lab, or you don't even know, like, what would business research look like? What would it be to be a philosophy researcher? You don't need to know anything. You just need to have an open mind and an enthusiasm to learn, and the rest will kind of fall into place. So that's nice too. Moving ahead, this slide gives us a bit of background on our faculty, which I already touched on. But between faculty past and present, 84 have been awarded Nobel Prizes. So this is just a testament to how our faculty are really some of the top in their field. And one example I'll give is the chair of the Department of Biology, Martin Chalfie, actually was awarded the Nobel Prize back in 2008, I believe, for his discovery of GFP, which is green fluorescent protein. And this really revolutionized the way that microbiology research is being done. And because you're able to take this protein and integrate it into other organisms where it's not naturally found, you're able to track the progress of, for example, DNA production or production of a certain protein or things like that. And it just really provides a visually striking way to convey the results to the rest of the scientific community. And so Hughes, like I said, he chaired the Department of Biology. He teaches undergraduate classes still. He has a lab on campus. So if at any point, you were interested in hearing more about, like, well, how did you ever even come up with the idea of taking a jellyfish DNA and putting it to use in a new way, you could actually go to his office hours and talk to him about it. And all of our professors are very accessible through office hours and just by the fact that we all are on campus together. You might run into someone, an old professor you've had on College Walk, and you just start having conversation, and it really is more of an organic relationship. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the 2 undergraduate schools that our admissions office represents. And the first is Columbia College. This is our liberal arts school. That's where you're going to find the social sciences, natural sciences, arts, and humanities. Basically anything that's not engineering, you're going to find in Columbia College. So even if you're looking to study like biology, chemistry, physics, those are all Columbia College. And so naturally, the second school that we represent is Columbia Engineering. And here is where you're going to find 16 different engineering disciplines, as well as computer science, applied math, and applied physics. So there are 2 more undergraduate schools that I always like to shout out in case people are interested, but we're not going to talk about them in depth today. The first is the School of General Studies, which is for non-traditional students who have taken more than 1 gap year after high school and are looking to come back and complete an undergraduate education. And Barnard College, which is our women's sister school, and it's also an undergraduate institution for all women. But they both have their own separate admissions offices and admissions processes. So definitely check them out if you want to learn more about them. But the main academic experience that really ties Columbia College and Columbia Engineering together is the core curriculum. This was a curriculum of courses that was started back in 1919, so it's at this point 100 years old. And its main purpose is to ponder some of our biggest questions as humans. So, what does it mean to be a good person? You're talking about some of the most influential primary texts in literature and talking about the themes in them and why these texts are so influential today. And really just pondering questions of human existence in the world, which sounds really lofty and not very specific when I say it like that. But on the next slide, you're going to see a list of the courses for the core curriculum that are required in both schools. And I'm going to go through and explain what they're about, first of all, and then my experience with them as a student. So it's going to be a lot of information, but I'm going to break it down as simply as I can. But I definitely recommend going to the core curriculum website or the admissions office website later and reading about these courses a bit more in depth. So we're going to start off on the left side of the screen. And the first three courses you see, Literature, Humanities, Frontiers of Science, and University Writing, are the three core courses you're expected to take in your freshman year if you're in Columbia College. Literature Humanities is a year-long seminar-style course where you're reading the primary text of the Western canon. This means you're going to start off with the Iliad, and you're going to end with Virginia Woolf, Toni Morrison, and kind of just read everything in between. So you're not expected to read these books in full and write papers on every single one of them, but you're coming back to a 22-person seminar-style course, like I already mentioned, and just talking about the themes and why are we still talking about Homer's The Iliad hundreds of years after it was written? You know, what about this book is really speaking to us as a society and what makes it important? And the cool thing about this course is that it's taught by a wide variety of professors. So my first semester, I had a professor who was a scholar in theater and race and was doing a PhD in, how race and theater intersect. And the second semester, I actually switched sections, and I had a professor who was a scholar in Arabic poetry. So as you can imagine, same course, same books, but just very different approaches to how we're talking about them and reading them, which is what I always like to point out, that no two literature humanities classes are the same, and you're going to find a wide variety of experiences within both students and professors. Next, we have Frontiers of Science. This is a one-semester course that is meant to introduce students to analytical ways of thinking. It's done through the use of 4 broad areas of science, so astrophysics, neuroscience, earth science, and biodiversity. And they bring in guest lecturers from around the university to talk about each of these 4 broad areas of science and talk about why or how they're being used to kind of solve some of the world's big issues. So naturally, things like earth science are very important for issues such as climate change, or things like astrophysics if we're looking to expand our reach in space, I guess you could say. Astrophysics is a good thing to know. But you're not expected by any means to master astrophysics or neuroscience in a semester, but it just makes sure students are well informed about these fields and how they're being used in an analytical way to tackle these problems. Next up, we have University Writing. This is another one-semester course during your first year that really gets students up to speed with college-level writing. And there are a variety of sections that allow you to kind of cater your writing to your interests. That includes law and justice, data and society, or even just a general section called contemporary essays where you can kind of write about whatever you want. So by having these different theme sections, students are naturally going to choose sections that interest them, which leads to better writing. I always like to shout out the Undergraduate Writing Center with this course because we do offer a resource completely free for undergraduates to go and talk to graduate students in the English department and get help with their essays. It is not only for this course, but for any course you could have during your 4 years. But I definitely used during university writing to help me get up to speed with, what my professor expects of me when writing these different essays. So that's the first year. During your second year, you'll take a course called Contemporary Civilization. This is very similar in style to Literature Humanities in the fact that it's a year-long seminar-style course, but this time the syllabus is going to be focused on political philosophy. So now you're reading Plato's Republic, you're reading Aristotle, you're reading about totalitarianism, communism, capitalism, different forms of government. I took this course back in 2018, and even though it's been 2 years, some of the books we were reading were literally hundreds of years old and were still so applicable to our world today. It was kind of scary. And this time my professor, he was a Belgian man who's actually very deeply invested in Latin American politics, strangely enough. And so he was very much very passionate about some of the different philosophical discussions we get down to in the course. And so beyond talking about just government systems, you're really talking about the individual too. So what does it mean to be a good person or a good citizen? What do we owe each other as people living together in the society? So it's pretty cool. Next up, we have Art Humanities and Music Humanities. These are both 2 peas in the pod that really help students get out into New York City and take advantage of our location. So I'll start with Music Humanities. It is a kind of historical overview of some of the most important works of Western music to date. So you're you're listening to Beethoven's Symphony No. 5 and really listening to it in context of the time it was composed and thinking about what Beethoven was really trying to convey through the music. And you kind of do this with a variety of works over the course of history. When I took this course, I was able to go and see the Metropolitan Opera for only $5 and also go to Juilliard School of Music, and see free student concerts as well. So it was a great way to just get me off campus and really take advantage of the cultural scene. Similarly, Art Humanities does a similar thing, but except it's not a historical overview of art history. It's more of a curated selection of visual artworks that really introduce you to different forms of art. But same thing, you're going to be getting out to the city and seeing various art galleries. You can go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, MoMA, which is the Museum of Modern Art, and things like that. And especially for me, I'm really not like an artsy person. I really don't know much about that, but being able to talk about some of the more famous artworks in an academic way and really write about them, it just makes me a more confident writer, one, and feel like a more informed, like, cultural citizen, if you could say. Next up, we have the Global Core. So most of the courses I've talked about so far are really focused on Western this, Western that. And so the Global Core really wants to zoom out of New York, the U.S., the West, and look at other schools of thought, other ways of thinking. And this is a distribution requirement. So there are a lot of different ways you can fulfill this. Personally, like I mentioned, I did Portuguese, so I was interested in learning more about Brazilian culture, and I focused my 2 Global Core courses on Brazilian history and Afro-Brazilian culture, and that was really rewarding because I was able to even take the Global Core completely taught in Portuguese, which was great for my language skills and just for my own personal interest. But some other options include courses on the modern Middle East. You have courses on Vietnam and the world, Buddhism, African studies, really a variety of things. Like I said, the point is a global core. So whatever area of the world you want to learn more about historically, or even, in the contemporary sense, the global core is a good place to do that. Next up, we have our science requirement. So in addition to Frontiers of Science, you'll have to take 2 more science courses. If you're a STEM major, this is more or less baked into your major. But if you are a humanities person, don't fret. There are plenty of chill options for you too. So that includes weapons of mass destruction and physics for poets. So there are very much courses that are literally designed for non-science majors to complete this requirement. So you don't have to worry about taking a super hard science course to do this. We have a foreign language requirement for 4 semesters or 2 years. You can test out of this if you already speak a language other than English, or you already speak a second or third language. You can test out of this. But I also always highly recommend at least taking 1 language course while you're here, because they are some of the most fun courses you can take, and they're all capped at 15 students as well. So you're getting that really small summer-style course again, and I just think it's a fun time. They're very much kind of low-pressure courses, really meant to learn more about culture and language. So they've been some of my favorites so far. And then lastly, physical education. I'll come back to that one. So that was a mouthful. So we're going to switch over now to my Columbia College journey. So I just listed every single course in the core curriculum, but really, how does it really tie together? So our dean of Columbia College, Dean Valentini, started the My Columbia College journey a little while ago, and it's meant to get students thinking a bit more broadly about their time as a Columbia student. And so we have about, I think, 15 values here that students should be thinking about during their 4 years. So something like civic and individual responsibility, which is the first thing on the slide, could be directly tackled through a course like Contemporary Civilizations, where you're thinking about ethics and morals. But things in the bottom of the slide, such as teamwork and collaboration or wellness and resilience, are things that you're not going to learn directly in a classroom. They're things that you pick up and you learn over the course of, group projects, working in extracurriculars, and just living on campus. So this is a great way for students to not only get the most out of their courses, but get the most out of their entire experience living at Columbia. So moving on to our engineers, you guys take an abbreviated version of the core, but you're definitely still expected to engage with, critical reading, critical thinking, and all those good things. So to go through it a bit quickly, you have the option to take either Literature Humanities, Contemporary Civilizations, or 2 Global Core courses. So you get that year-long reading heavy kind of experience. You could take either art humanities or music humanities. And then instead of Frontiers of Science, you're going to take a course called The Art of Engineering. This is a survey course of all the different fields of engineering. So you're going to come in as a freshman, you're going to have an idea of what you want to major in, but you don't really know, I won't say you, but the course is meant to really expose you to all the different possibilities across the fields. That can be mechanical, civil, biomedical, electrical engineering. You're going to get a taste of all of those so that by the time you do declare a major, you're really informed on what interests you the most. And they also bring in guest lecturers from the university to teach each kind of discipline. And it's very much a project-based course, so you're getting hands-on experience with that. You take another semester, you also take a semester of university writing, and then you have a list of technical requirements that are really just meant to get you prepared for your upper-level major courses. So that includes calculus, physics, chemistry, computer science, and economics as well. We do have a PE requirement in both schools. This is also something that students tend to kind of push off to the very end, but is honestly very easy to complete. So that can be something as involved as karate or judo, or something as laid back as self-paced running or walking. So there are a variety of ways to fulfill that requirement that students do take advantage of. And if you're in Columbia College, you do have to do a swim test. The legend goes that if you're in Columbia College and Manhattan, which is an island, which is sink, you need to somehow be able to save yourself. But if you're an engineer, you don't have to do a swim test because you can just build a boat. So that's why the engineers don't have a swim test. Similarly to the My Columbia College journey, our engineering school is really focused on engineering for humanity. So this was an initiative that was kind of pioneered by the dean of the school, Mary Boyce, and it has 5 pillars, which include creativity, sustainability, health, security, and connection. And so the point of it is really to get students thinking like, okay, I want to be an engineer, but who am I engineering for? What are my projects doing for the greater good of society? So one example I'll give is under the creativity pillar. So Professor Grinspun of the Department of the Computer Science actually worked with Disney Animation Studios in the creation of both the movies Moana and Tangled, and he was able to use computer animation and physics simulation to help make the water in Moana look more realistic and Rapunzel's hair in Tangled flow more naturally. So that's something that you might not immediately think of when you think of computer science, but it is a way that our professors and students are putting forth their skills and knowledge for something that's very much enjoyable for millions of children around the world. So that's one way you can really engineer for humanity. And if you go on the website for Engineering for Humanity, you can see examples for all of these pillars and how engineers are changing the world for the better through their skills and knowledge. So I'm going to take a break for questions now. And thank you for listening so far.
Thanks so much, Nakima, for going into talking about academics and what it's like to study at Columbia. We actually only have a couple questions so far, so to those who are in attendance, feel free to send in more, and maybe we can get to them in our next Q&A session. But for this one, I think the best questions we had was, one, you've talked a lot about academic opportunities with some really great examples, but could you also touch on maybe a favorite class that you've taken or academic experience you've had at Columbia so far?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'll give you 2 things. So the first, my favorite class so far has been a psychology lecture I took last semester actually, called Thinking and Decision Making, and I didn't really go in with any expectations at all, but I actually was very much surprised at how much goes into, like, for example, you make thousands of decisions every single day, and there are a lot of different unconscious behaviors that go into, picking out what shirt you're going to wear versus, picking what college you want to go to, in every decision in between. So I really like that one. And then an academic experience, I always like to talk about when my literature humanities class during my first year went to see a play, and my professor got us front row seats because she knew the people who were putting on the play, so she got us VIP treatment. We got to talk to the director and one of the actors afterwards, and then she took us out for macaroni and cheese for after the play. So that was really fun. And we did tie the play into class as well, but it was mostly just to get out into the city.
That's so awesome. Yeah. Next question, really quick, is talking about majors and how to navigate them. Could you maybe talk about what the process is like to declare a major? What is it like for students who are undecided when they come in?
Yeah, so Columbia College students declare their major during the spring of sophomore year, and the engineers declare during the fall of sophomore year. So you have that whole first year to kind of explore and figure out what you're leaning towards. Many students do come in undecided, and many people change their majors at least 2 or 3 times. I have a friend who changed her major at least 4 times. And I think the best way to kind of figure it out is to just try everything, which sounds a little vague. So during your first semester, you might take a couple core classes, but then the rest of your schedule can be you're taking courses in different departments and seeing which one kind of sticks with you. Departments will also have open houses during major declaration time, where you can go and learn more about the different opportunities. So, for example, the environmental biology department, you're required to do a senior thesis. So during that open house, they can explain more about that. Or if you're looking to do a humanities major, you can go and talk to the professors there and learn about performance opportunities or things like that. So you have time to explore and kind of feel it out.
Awesome. Yeah, I changed my major 3 times too, so can relate to that. But we can move on and hear more about student life real quick before our next Q&A session. Thanks so much.
Cool. So, one second. So, I've talked a lot about academics, so you're probably wondering what we do outside of the classroom by now. So this slide's going to talk a little bit about that. Starting off with housing on the top half of the screen. So, how does housing work? Housing is guaranteed for all 4 years and required for your first year. But after that, 95% of students choose to live on campus all 4 years. So it's very much a residential campus, which I am personally a big fan of. We have over 20 residence halls. 5 of them are dedicated to the first year living experience specifically. And you can find a variety of options, whether it's having a single. Actually, it's very common to have a single your first year if you're not really into the whole roommate thing, or you either want to have your own private space. But there are also doubles and suite style living available as well. After your first year, you can choose who you live with in your housing group, and you can live in a more traditional corridor style dorm, or live in a suite style or an apartment style dorm where you have your own kitchen and bathroom to yourself and everything in between. So I'm currently in a dorm as we speak, so housing feels very near and dear to my heart at this moment. 20% of students participate in Greek life, which is about 1 in 5. So it definitely doesn't dominate the social scene by any means, but it is there and it's available if you are interested in doing more with that. Another thing I like to point out are our special interest communities. So these are special houses that are surrounded around one specific interest. This can be jazz house if you're interested in jazz music, writer's house, comedy house, Casa Latina, which is for Hispanic students, Latinx students, or the Pan-African house for students of an African identifying background, things like that. And these are great ways to meet students who have a similar interest with you and really kind of live and plan events together. As a first year, you kind of rank your choices for which dorms you would be interested in living in, and then you get kind of spread out between them. People are very protective of their first year dorm, and it's a great way to make community for sure. In the lower left hand of the screen, talk a bit about dining. So we have over 12 on-campus dining options, and 3 of them are going to be our main dining halls. So our dining plans are required for the first year, but about 80% of students choose to stay on the dining plan in some shape or form over the course of their 4 years, and they're split into 3 parts. So you have dining dollars, flex dollars, and meal swipes. Meal swipes are where you can swipe into any of the dining halls and have unlimited food. It's buffet style. You can stay as long as you want, eat as much as you want. Dining dollars are on-campus money that you can use at the various cafes and delis that are spread across campus. So if you just need a quick coffee or a snack before class, you can pay for it with dining dollars. And flex dollars are like dining dollars, but they can be used at off-campus locations nearby campus. So the local grocery store or the Shake Shack or the local pastry shop, will accept flex dollars instead of real money. Between our 3 on-campus dining halls, you're going to find a bit of a different personality for each of them. The first is Ferris. This is kind of a grab-and-go style eating situation. They do have seating, so you can stay and eat, but it's really well known for its pizza, for its pasta bar, for its omelet bar, for its salad bar, and as well as the action bar. So that's where you're going to find different meals every single day. You can go and get the action bar. John Jay Dining Hall is a more traditional style one. It's actually this picture right here where it says flexible. That picture behind that is John Jay. You're going to find long wooden tables and a lot of people eating. But yeah, so that's going to be another buffet style one, but it's more focused on kind of traditional dinner foods and things like that. It's kind of hard to explain again. And then lastly, we have JJ's Place, which is the late night eating dining hall. This one's open for 22 hours a day, and that's where you can go any time of the day and grab pancakes, you can get burgers, you can get chicken tenders, fries, dining food, or diner-style food. And with it being open 22 hours a day, all of our dining halls are accessible at any point, 24/7. So food is never going to be an issue as long as you're on a dining plan. As you can see on the lower right-hand part of the screen, we have over 500 student groups and organizations. So that's going to range from political groups to performance arts groups to identity-based groups and really everything else you'd probably want. At the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned that I am a tour guide. I've been involved with the performing arts, with dance and theater, and I'm an orientation leader. And so I didn't necessarily know I wanted to do those things before coming in. So I highly recommend that students, if there's a club that, even piques your interest a little bit, just go to their information sessions or take one of their flyers, join their email list, because you never know where you're going to find community and friends. And with so many groups, it's just such a great time to try something new that you might not have had the chance to in high school, which is something that I definitely took advantage of. We'll talk a bit about athletics now. So we have 31 Division I teams, but if you're not going for gold in sports, we also have 40-plus club and intramural sports that you're able to partake in on a more recreational level. One of my friends is on the Ultimate Frisbee team, and she has been a part of it for the past 3 years and has been able to travel around the Northeast, going to tournaments and meeting other Ultimate Frisbee teams at different schools. And she's also the social chair at the club, so she plans all the parties and events throughout the year for the teammates to get to know each other and really bond. We have, out of our kind of Division I sports, some of the more notable are fencing and archery. But our football team is also pretty good, or at least they have been getting better in the past few years, which leads me to one of the good traditions I always like to mention, is homecoming. So every October, we would have homecoming game where your friends, your family, and alumni can come back and kind of celebrate the football team together. And so I'm from Georgia, so it's a pretty football-heavy state. So I wasn't really sure what to picture when coming up to the Northeast and how they treated football, but I was very pleasantly surprised at how much fun it was. During my first year, we played against another school, and we actually went into overtime, which was very exciting. And right when we scored that last touchdown, everyone went crazy. We all rushed out into the field. Everyone was screaming. The marching band was going crazy. They were blasting these guys with speakers, and we were just so happy that we'd won, and we were happy to be Columbia students that day. So that was definitely one of my favorite memories of first year, and I'm excited for the days when we can go back and play some more football. And you may be wondering, okay, where do you guys put a football field in Manhattan? And we actually are the owners of the only football field in Manhattan, up at Baker Field. That's where you're going to find the facilities for all the field sports, so football, soccer, field hockey, lacrosse, anything that requires a field, you can find it there. And it's very accessible from campus, either by subway or by shuttle bus. Each take about 15 minutes to get there. Coming back down to Morningside Heights from uptown, like I mentioned earlier, we are located in Morningside Heights. So we've been here since 1897 and are an integral part of the history of the neighborhood. And it really is reflected in the people who live here and the businesses. So you can always find faculty kind of just mingling around the area because half the neighborhood is faculty living here. And we do have 3 beautiful parks we are surrounded by as well. So if you're interested in green spaces, we have Riverside Park to our west, Morningside Park to our east, and Central Park to our south, allowing us a lot of time and space to go and enjoy kind of the nature of New York, which isn't maybe the first thing you think of when you think of New York City, but the parks are really the highlight sometimes. And we are only 15 minutes away from Times Square, which is super convenient and very nice for people who like to go out and explore the 5 boroughs. We have over 115 historical landmarks, including Grant's Tomb in Riverside Park and the Cathedral of St. John the Divine, which is this beautiful cathedral on 112. I highly recommend looking at pictures of it. And so, since we are only 15 minutes from Times Square, we do have a subway stop right outside of our main gate that allows students access to all of the city very easily. So we're going to talk a bit about off-campus living, off-campus life, I should say. So we are in New York. It's definitely an exciting place to live as a student, and the school really does support us in a lot of ways to ensure that we can access all of the great things the city has to offer affordably. One way is through our Ticket Information Center. This is where you're going to be able to find discounted tickets to Broadway shows, sports, movies, and really anything else you might be interested in doing. We also have the Columbia Arts Initiative, which is an initiative that allows you to get into 30 museums for free with your Columbia ID. And even in addition to that, many museums have student specialty hours or, student discounts on top of their natural or, their regular price. So being a student is a great time to just go out and explore the city because people know that you're a student, you don't have much money, and are really catering to that. Professional opportunities are also really abundant as well. So our Center for Career Education does a great job of connecting students with the different professional avenues of New York. So just running over my words today. So one of the nice things about being in New York is that you have access to a variety of industries, whether that be financial, you want to do journalism, you're interested in the sciences, there are a bunch of labs too. You can really find any type of internship you'd like in the city, and many students don't have class on Fridays, allowing them to take advantage of a part-time opportunity. So this past semester, I was involved with an internship that was focused on documentary media, and I was able to get that through a program run through our Center for Career Education and intern at this company for 12 weeks while getting a stipend as well, all while taking classes. So it's a bit of a balance sometimes, but it's very nice to know that just because we're doing very, very much like invested in academics doesn't mean you still can't take advantage of the professional opportunities as well. So I think I'm going to end it there and take some more questions, but thank you all for listening so far.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing more about student life and what it's like to experience Columbia outside the classroom. Still not seeing too many questions, so to our attendees, feel free to send in more again. But the first question I have is, for students who are coming to Columbia from outside of New York City, could you talk about what the transition is like and what the experience is for you getting used to being a Columbia student?
Yeah, that's a good question. So most students aren't coming from New York, so you're definitely in good company there. And it's kind of a bonding experience as well, kind of exploring the city together with, the friends you're able to make on campus. I definitely did get homesick at times, and it's very normal. And there are a lot of support systems there for students who are feeling like, they miss home or they need a bit more of community as well. I would say one thing that I maybe didn't expect was just how fast-paced kind of life is here. People do like to keep themselves busy, and I don't know if that's like Columbia or if it's just a greater, cause since we're in New York, city that never sleeps type of vibe. So that's one thing that you should definitely be aware of. But I think everyone takes time to adapt, and by the time my first year was over, I definitely felt like a bit more of a New Yorker than when I entered. And having my friends and the support system was definitely a big part of that.
Awesome. Yeah. One of the next questions that we just got that I think is a great question is, what would you say one of the most defining moments of your college experience has been so far? Or maybe just a favorite Columbia moment?
That's a good question. I don't think I've gotten that one before. So one really kind of only at Columbia moment actually happened last semester. So like I said, I had an internship in Brooklyn, and I was a student and all those fun things. And so one morning I get up and I look at my Instagram and I see my friend had won tickets to see Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, which is a Broadway show, very hard to get tickets to. And so I was like, oh, she had an extra ticket. So I immediately messaged her and I was like, hey, do you still have this ticket? And she's like, yeah, the show's at 2 p.m. today. And I was like, oh, wow, I actually have work and class. Let me not forget that. And so I was like, but this is a one-time opportunity. So I emailed my professor, emailed my boss, and I'm like, hey, I got these tickets. Can I just not, can I rearrange my schedule and can I skip class? And they were both actually very understanding because they understood how awesome this was. And so by the time I was able to change my work schedule, rush over to the theater, I was literally in my seat probably a minute before the show even started because I had to rush from Brooklyn to Times Square, but it was all worth it. And it was just it was one of those days where I was like, I'm just so happy to be here. And it's something that could only happen at Columbia. So.
Amazing. I think the last question we'll answer before we get to talking about admissions and financial aid, which it looks like so many of these are geared towards. They're asking about Columbia's response to the pandemic this year. And so I'm going to put in the chat a link to Columbia's coronavirus response community page that students, faculty, staff use. But I think that from your point of view, it might be helpful to talk about what the virtual classroom experience has been like and how you feel the administration has been able to support students, even though we are in very different circumstances this academic year.
Yeah, so I'll talk more about my experience last semester because this semester has barely started. But last semester was definitely a transition, but I really appreciated how much my professors were honest with us and saying we've never done this either, so we're just going to need a lot of patience and understanding from everyone and making this the most positive experience we can. And I found something similar in most of my classes so far this semester as well. Professors are really catering to students' needs, especially with everyone spread across various time zones and needing having different learning environments. They were just being accommodating, which is nice. On an administrative level, they've been doing a lot to try and keep students feeling connected as much as they can through virtual events, having town halls and allowing students to kind of come, and families in general, come and ask questions about, how long is this going to last and how are we going to make sure that students still feel connected to campus and really hearing our concerns. So that's been nice too, as much as they can.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing your perspective, but I just want to emphasize the extent to which Columbia is responding to the pandemic, trying to make it easier, safer for students and faculty and staff who are still in the city to access campus, ensuring that while our community members are on campus, they're practicing safe practices as much as they can. So this is in posting the link, trying to show the extent to which this is a complex issue, but our university, all the way from our president to me, are responding in whatever ways we can to ensure that we are behaving responsibly, but also keeping our community and the rest of New York City safe. Moving into admissions and financial aid, I do have some notes that I want to touch on, but I'll also try to answer some of the questions that I've seen throughout the past hour. But I want to start by talking about what is our job? What do we do when we're reading applications? So admissions officers, when they read applications, we review them holistically, regionally, and individually. So for holistically, holistic admissions is a bit of a buzzword, but ultimately, I think the best way to explain it is that students are more than their numbers in their application. They are more than just their essays. They are ultimately potential community members when they apply to us. And so we look at applications with that view. We're looking at your academics. We're looking at your performance throughout your 4 years, your activities you've been involved in, but also your essays and how you express yourself. Holistic admissions is a process through which we're able to view you as a potential community member, and thus everything matters in looking at your application. Moving into the last two terms that I said, regionally, and individually. So admissions officers at Columbia are regional officers. I'm the regional officer for the northern half of Texas and the southern half of New Jersey. So that means I would normally travel there, do presentations there, but also be responsible for reviewing applications that come from these areas. This allows me to be more of an expert per se on these areas and better understand where students are coming from rather than receiving applications from all over and not being able to quite understand the context of students' experiences. And then last, in reading individually, in reviewing applications, we go one by one. It's almost fruitless to compare students who are having such unlike experiences from one school or one area to another. So in reading and then also in discussion, it won't happen that Johnny from Texas with AP classes will be compared to Johnny in Jersey with IB coursework. It's ultimately solely focused on the student as an individual and their performance in their own context with the situations that they've grown up in, interacted in, and worked in, and succeeded in throughout their high school journey. Moving into the next slide, we'll be able to see what we'll actually be reviewing when looking at your applications. So you can apply to Columbia through the Common Application, the Coalition Application, or the QuestBridge application. We have no preference between the three, but leave ourselves open to receiving all three to be as accessible as possible. I encourage all of our attendees who are thinking about applying to explore the differences between the three and see which is best for them. Within these applications, there is so much that you can include about yourself. So I think it's really important to pay attention to the ways in which you're able to express yourself in your essays, your writing. That is going to be what allows us to see you as a community member, even more so than the testing, the academic requirements. Those numbers are going to allow us to see if you can handle the academic rigor of Columbia and our classes that we have. But in looking for fit for our community, the writing portions are going to be crucial to understanding how you might interact with your peers around you if you were to be part of our community on campus or virtually. In the secondary school report, that's going to be things that you have already done. So the bulk of your work when applying is going to be through your writing, your essays, talking about your activities that you're involved in. But in the school report, we are getting your transcripts, seeing your grades that you've received over your 4 years in high school. I just want to note that Columbia absolutely supports the decisions that schools and administrations have had to make in the wake of the pandemic in the spring and in the future coming years. So if your school has had to go to pass-fail or credit-no credit or has gone with the same policies, we're taking all of that into context and absolutely support the decisions that they had to make to ensure student success. For standardized testing, this is another thing that has changed this year, different from past years. We are absolutely test optional this year, so if you have scores and would like to send them, feel free to do so. But if you don't want to send your score or you haven't had the chance to take a test, feel free to not send them, and we will review your application completely without that leaving you any disadvantage within the admissions process. Next is teacher recommendations. This is just a note that in applying to Columbia, when you are applying, you are saying which majors you're thinking about choosing to study when you come to Columbia. So for engineers, we're hoping that your teachers can help speak to your engineering potential. So a math or science teacher for at least one of your two teacher recommendations would be important. But otherwise for Columbia College, for liberal arts majors, hoping to get teachers that have been part of your core experience, so English, social studies, math, or science, or teachers that really are able to speak to your maturity and leadership in the classroom. So hoping for more recent teachers that truly know you well. And that's pretty much all I'll say for admissions. I hope that was able to answer most of our questions. Moving to the right side of the slide, talking about financial aid, a crucial part of understanding Columbia's admissions process and also the support we're able to give students. So when you're applying to Columbia, Primarily, we in the admissions office are going to be focused on the admissions part, the left half. On the other side, our financial aid officers are going to be reviewing the right side. So you're sending in your tax forms from the past year and applying, as well as the FAFSA, or the application for federal aid, and then the CSS profile application for private schools, through which we're able to calculate institutional aid. This is all calculated to go into our need-based financial aid policies that I can talk about more on the next slide. Great. So the reason I wanted to leave a little bit more time for this is because need-based financial aid and the way through which we do it is pretty unique amongst all schools across the United States. So if with our need-based financial aid policies, that ultimately means that we are not giving athletic aid, we're not giving merit scholarships or academic scholarships. It's all based on a family's financial need. When we are calculating your financial aid that we're able to disperse, we ensure that we meet the full need for students and families with no loans within the package. Ultimately, the way that that will look is, for an example, if a family, in sending all these forms that I mentioned earlier, shows that they are able to afford, let's say, $8,000 a year for the academic year, the cost of attendance for the year at Columbia is obviously much higher than that. But our admissions office and financial aid office commit to filling that gap completely with our need-based aid, no loans, perhaps a student work-study contribution and a student work contribution. In our need-based financial aid policies, we're also need-blind in our review of applications. This means that your financial need is something that cannot disadvantage you in our process. This need-blind policy is for students within the United States who are domestic applicants. However, for students who are international, we are need-aware. All that means is that when looking through your application, we want to ensure that we're able to meet the full financial need that you might have. We have millions and millions of dollars available for students with our international financial aid budget. So it's just an insurance policy to ensure that we can fully support the students who are attending from all across the world. For families, students who are making $60,000 and under, there is a $0 expected family or parent contribution within your financial aid package. And then lastly, you can see our average financial aid package there, but I really want to touch on the importance and the usefulness of our, net price calculator, as well as our My Intuition Quick College Cost Estimator. These are both calculators that families can use to calculate a estimate of what financial aid might look like for them. The net price calculator will give you one number, and the My Intuition Quick College Cost Estimator will give you a range. They both have different uses, but ultimately they're using aggregate, standardized data to give you a picture of what it might look like. I think this is a powerful tool for students and families to use because many schools will have the My Intuition Quick College Cost Estimator, but all schools across the U.S. on their website will have a net price calculator that will allow you to compare what it might look like to attend Columbia versus another institution. I think that covers everything. Hopefully I was able to get to all of your questions talking about admissions, but let's see. We'll do for one last Q&A session if there are any remainders, but otherwise I just want to thank everybody for being here. Below you can see the emails for undergraduate admissions, UGRAD Ask, that goes to admissions officers. Ask a Student will go to our student interns, and they'll be able to answer more community-based questions or questions specifically for students if you have a question about a particular major and what the experience is like. And then for financial aid officers, you can go to ugrad-finaid@columbia.edu. If you are part of my region, I think I saw that question in our Q&A, you can also just Google Columbia Regional Officers to see which officer is responsible for reviewing your application, but you'll also be directed that way if you email ugrad-ask@columbia.edu. I'm not seeing too many other questions. And so with just over a minute left, I think it would be best to close. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Nikema, for sharing so much valuable information about the student experience at Columbia. Thanks to the student interns in the back end helping to answer so many questions that we've gotten from the attendees. Wishing everybody well. Hope that you have enjoyed this past hour with us and hope that you engage with us in other ways. We have more virtual sessions that you can check out, from student panels to faculty featured classes, as well as a great social media team and page on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. I think we have a Twitter. And other great websites. So we look forward to seeing you in the virtual realm and maybe in person further in the future. But take care, everyone. Thank you for joining. Have a great day.